Hey, everybody, this is Eric Mishi, SAVE Executive Director, Suicide Awareness, Voices of Education. Good Friday morning. It has been an incredible week as we've had the opportunity to spend time throughout this entire week of Suicide Prevention Awareness Week, talking with people all over the country about all sorts of issues related to mental health, suicide awareness, suicide prevention, ranging from rural mental health issues to how do we help veterans prevent suicide to 988 on tribal nations. It's really been fascinating conversations, a lot of really smart people all over the country doing incredible kind of things. And so we kind of come to the end of this week, continuing to focus on some of the conversation around the importance of protecting youth while they're on social media and making sure that we are holding big tech companies who create these social media platforms accountable for their products and creating and providing guardrails that protect youth without censoring the internet, without keeping them away from this resource, which in this day and age is a valuable resource for them. And we think we can do both. And so I'm pleased to be able to share with us today in this conversation the tech policy advisor for United States Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat from Connecticut, Collin Anderson. We're going to talk a little bit about Kids Online Safety Act, what it is, where it's at, and what all of us can do to help make sure that this important piece of legislation gets passed into law. Collin, good morning, and thanks for being with us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, and I'm just a big fan of the work that you've been doing.
Well, we're a big fan of the work you've been doing. You have been one of the leaders here in the U.S. Senate, as those of us who have been part of this coalition to pass COSA now. And so maybe we just start a little bit. You and I chatted before we started. You're originally from Grand Forks, so a little bit of background on you and kind of what do you do when you say that you're the tech policy advisor for the senator? What does that exactly mean?
Sure, that's a great question. My background is actually computer science. I, kind of had the fortune of studying computer science, especially at a time in which we started to see, the tech issues become policy issues, and a little bit also of the sheen of tech starting to wear off, and us, people, I think, at a kitchen table level, having conversations about how they felt, that tech platforms could spur hate, polarization, division, national security risks, privacy intrusions, these sorts of issues. And so, fortunately, around 7 years ago, I had an opportunity to do a congressional fellowship. And I got connected with the Blumenthal office, and talking with the Blumenthal office, it was just sort of, kind of love at first sight, because as much as it feels like to a certain extent getting into this in the early 2000s, kind of, 15 years ago or so, felt like it was a little bit ahead of some of the issues. I was fortunate to start to work for a member that had, I think, looked at this stuff very early. And so, kind of a different lane. He was involved with the antitrust litigation against Microsoft, but also, 2006, 2007, he took an interest in, for example, the issue of registered sex offenders on MySpace and Facebook, then the Facebook, contacting children on the platform. And after that, it was things like Google's intrusion into privacy and these sorts of issues. And so I've been very fortunate to work for a member that I think has long understood the power of these companies, the influence of these companies, and that while a lot of the products and services that we get from these companies are great and we love them and they're essential for our social lives, our political lives, our religious lives, our development, our mental health, there are also downsides. And that kind of nuance, I think, is helpful in terms of spotting these potential issues when they come up, and understanding how to thread the needle on some of the legislative remedies. day to day, it's you kind of go in and you think that you're working on these issues in terms of writing bills all day or passing laws all day, but so much of working in Congress is oversight. And oversight was so essential. The sort of a little bit more tedious, less notice issues was so essential to how COSA started, because even the way that we got into this as an issue was even just as simple as writing a letter to Facebook, asking some questions to Facebook about what they knew about their mental health harms, which is kind of a pretty normal part of my day, and not to kind of launch right into it, but this started from just as simply as writing a letter to Facebook, getting an evasive answer, finding out about a whistleblower, holding hearings, holding more hearings, and then from there, both starting to develop out the kind of framework of interventions that would become COSA, as well as politically educating the other members of our committee, of the United States Senate, and I think connecting with the set of parents and mental health providers at a federal level, seeing the things that were happening to them on a day-to-day basis all of a sudden becoming reflected in congressional debate. I think that those are all, that is so much of what actually the role entails as a policy advisor, and really how we came up to this point that we have the Kids Online Safety Act.
So let's kind of dive right into the Kids Online Safety Act. We're an organization that focuses on suicide awareness and prevention. So a lot of our effort, obviously, again, this entire week, this entire month is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And one of the questions we've got a LinkedIn user is asking, can you speak on the effects of technology and social media on the mental health of our youth? And there's a huge and growing and expanding body of evidence that is showing that the harms created by social media platforms, particularly on adolescent youth, brain development, mental health, suicidal ideation, and suicide is clearly a clear and present danger for America's youth. And so as Senator Blumenthal and Senator Blackburn and others put this kind of bipartisan legislation together, it was with the understanding that, one, we need to make sure that we understand we're not going to unring this bell of technology and social media. It is as ingrained in our lives and our kids' lives as this phone, but that you can protect them while they're there, that these are not mutually exclusive, that this isn't about censoring the internet. So at a 35,000 foot view, what is it that COSA is intended to do? And then how do you respond to those critics of the legislation who continue to insist that this is nothing more than a censorship bill?
Sure, that's a great question. I think you're absolutely right, where part of going about this with nuance is we hear often and totally understand and agree that social media is not a net negative. And I think sometimes Facebook and other tech companies kind of tried to cloud the issue by saying two things. One is, and this was in their letter response to us from our kind of first engagements, they say, well, there's no scientific correlation that has been established at a population scale to show that this is there's a direct causal impact, and they try to kind of cloud the issue. When on the other hand, everyone who's doing mental health services says there's a direct relationship between young people getting addicted to eating disorder, material, just getting inundated based off of the algorithms, getting outreach from random people on the internet, these sorts of things, to the harms that are happening. The other way that they've tried to cloud the issue is saying, well, you're just trying to shut down the internet for young people, or you're hostile to the internet. We also always, I'm not sure if I should actually use this example, but we have a really huge coalition of young people in support of this bill. And I often make the joke of, I never want to be the sort of banning heavy metal music and video games. I don't want to be the person picking the fight against Mortal Kombat of my time. And part of that, and then they never actually understand what I'm talking about. And part of it is and you hear this a lot from Senator Blumenthal, is we're not trying to ban young people. Firstly, because that's never going to work. My computer science background is in cybersecurity, and I learned cybersecurity through bypassing parental controls, which was a great education, but not really an effective policy intervention. And then and we understand that people find community. I come from a rural background. I found community on the internet. And so you don't want to ban that. What you want is to provide more of the good and to kind of push back more of the bad. And that's pretty easily accomplishable through even small interventions. I think a really good test case is that in the UK there was an age-appropriate design code. That launched in 2020. The moment that happened, all of a sudden the tech companies were starting to provide just basic options that were really, I think, good interventions that they had never thought about doing or hadn't been pushed to be doing. That's things like, when a 14-year-old creates an account, it should be private by default. Young people should have the ability to start to control for themselves, not for the government, control for themselves the type of content that's being pushed to them and how it's being pushed through to them, so that they can kind of escape or control some of these rabbit holes. And so, I think part of the reason why we have this coalition of young people that did happen in the 90s is because these young people know that they have a really negative, sometimes, experience with social media. And they, these kids are sharp. They know they know when they're feeling pain, and they want to stop that pain. And a lot of the intervention is just giving them the tools to be able to make them, give themselves a more safe and comfortable space, and to stop when the social media platforms are doing things that they don't feel are right. And so, there's no silver bullet to this. I mean, this is kind of just some of the frustrating thing about explaining the bill, because it's a bunch of small things versus kind of a one big thing. So much of the Kids Online Safety Act is just saying, look, if the platforms just are obligated and provide safeguards to young people, or parental tools in the case of, I think, much younger people, you're going to be able to give them the opportunity to turn off the algorithmic recommendation system when it's sending them down a spiraling black hole, or give them the options of controlling their privacy to stop, predators, spammers, scammers, criminals who, mean them no good from contacting them. And all of these, also, aside, so there's safeguards. There's kind of three, sorry to jump around, there's kind of three principles behind COSA at a general level. One is obligations to provide safeguards. That's not a First Amendment issue. That's not shutting down spaces. It's just giving people the tools to make their experience better for them. The second principle is transparency. That first example, I think we've all had experiences, and we've all seen how the platforms, really have a lot of resources and a lot of experiences deflecting and distracting from the issues, or saying that there aren't problems, or saying the thing that they just did solves all of the problems that they've had before, which they denied existed before. And especially having that experience of running the committee responsible for these issues, sending a bipartisan letter to one of the companies, and having just an evasive, misleading, and somewhat false answer really shows that transparency is a thing that is lacking. And if you look at sort of how right after you have whistleblower disclosures, we've had repeated ones, or really good reporting like the Wall Street Journal has done, all of a sudden when that happens, suddenly there are changes that they could make that they have never made before. So part of COSA is also just requiring transparency a big factor in this is that for the larger platforms where they have a user base of young people, they would have to do independent annual audits about their efforts to protect young people on their platform. And the idea behind that is, it's kind of sunlight is the best disinfectant. If you're a tech company and you know that an auditor is gonna say you've got a failing grade for protecting children, that's gonna hurt you in the market. It's gonna hurt your user base. Parents aren't gonna feel comfortable letting their kids on the platform, and it's gonna bring the issue back to the mainstream media or Congress and continue to drive a narrative about whether these companies are keeping up with the issue. So transparency, again, the transparency is not about banning young people. It's just giving consumers the information that they don't have about whether, if these platforms are really doing what they should be doing. The third thing is that we have a duty of care. And this is a really basic concept elsewhere in the law, which is to say, for your customers, for your clients, you have an obligation to keep their best interest first. And what that is to say, it's not about content, it's not about speech. These platforms, a lot of the harms that we talk about and we're concerned about are not because somebody says something mean on the internet or says, post something horrific on the internet. It is about the fact that these platforms, for the purposes of driving up ad revenue, keeping people hooked and growing their user base, make some of the most addictive, manipulative products that have ever existed. People don't necessarily, it's not the triggering issue for suicidal ideation, eating disorder content, bullying, and these sorts of things is not that somebody happened upon one bad post. It is that these algorithmic recommendation systems are designed to find your deepest insecurity or the thing that's going to keep you on the platform and keep bringing you back. And so if it sees that you're insecure about your weight or you're insecure about some of the things that are happening in your life, as I was as a teen and so many people were, it's going to latch on to that and it's going to continue to feed that to you. And so the duty of care, and we've made this so explicit so many times throughout the bill, is not about saying you can't have bad stuff on the internet. It's about saying when you design your algorithms or the settings or your push notifications, so many of the product features, you have to take into consideration how that might impact the mental health and well-being of the young person. That's not, it's not only that obligation is not a censorship obligation. we make repeatedly clear through the bill that this has nothing to do with content. It has everything to do with how they design their own apps. And just to belabor the point and provide one option, we kind of started out on this a little bit early, but after the fact, the state attorneys general have done really good work in their litigation, looking at some of the design, the sort of thinking that has gone through some of the design of these features, and they're just stunning. The sort of anecdotes that you pull out of the litigation against, for example, Facebook, when it comes to Instagram, because you see these cases where, what they'll do is they'll say, we've got this feature, this image filter. Again, something that Instagram itself is designing, not a content issue. And they'll say this filter that makes it look like you've had plastic surgery. You see Instagram's own staff, their own well-being staff, saying, we can't provide this to young people because we think that it's going to foster, deep body image insecurity. It's going to foster eating disorders. It's going to really be detrimental to kids' mental health. And you see kind of just broad opposition within the company. And then they go out and they consult mental health experts and broad opposition within mental health experts. And it gets to the executives and they just don't care, because ultimately that plastic surgery image filter is going to be very popular for a little bit and get a little bit more clicks, and that's all they care about. And so that's what we target with the duty of care, which is to say, when you're designing this yourself, if everyone in your company and every independent expert says this is harmful what you are doing to young people, we can't create legal accountability for that. And again, so I mean, this isn't parental verification. This isn't, banning young people from the internet. It's not censorship. It's just really, product safety legislation like every other industry has. And so that's, why it's hard to explain this bill in an elevator pitch, but what it does.
Well, and you did very well with that elevator pitch. When I think of the work that this very broad, very bipartisan coalition has done to try to raise awareness around this issue, I'm mindful of the fact that this battle, this fight with big tech is not the first time something like this has happened in American public policy in trying to make products safer. The automobile industry, right, for decades fought against safe design standards, right? Didn't want to do seatbelts, didn't want to do airbags, and all of which was there's no evidence of this. There's not overwhelming evidence of the benefit. It's going to add a cost to the vehicle that's going to make it prohibitive for customers, and it's also a freedom issue. Well, it's also the reality that that automobile safety impacts not just the person driving the car, but the person on the other side of that car. And there's broad social implications for dangerous products in the marketplace. When we look at tobacco, same thing. It's almost as if Mark Zuckerberg and the rest of big tech kind of snuck into big tobacco's warehouse and dusted off their blueprints about how do they fight back against this idea that their products, which are clearly shown to be dangerous to certain segments of the society, need to have some kind of regulation to it. Yesterday there was an announcement that a lot of these big tech companies are now going to fund an initiative where they're going to come up with ways to figure out how to make their products, less likely to cause suicidal ideation and suicide with kids, right? This is after years and years and years of denying that that's actually happened. Now, the idea that these companies are going to fund this initiative should make us all wonder where the chickens are while the fox is guarding the hen house, right? And so as we talk about this legislation and we talk about the level of bipartisanship, you're there in DC. I used to be in DC. I used to be a chief of staff in the Senate at a time when bipartisanship wasn't all that uncommon. You live in an era in which it's kind of a unicorn. And so this is a bill that's gotten really broad, not just bipartisan support, but ideological support as well in Washington.
Well, I mean, take it from the top. Senator Blumenthal and Senator Blackburn don't agree on a lot, but they've been such close collaborators on this. When we voted out of the Senate on a 91-3 vote. Our absentees, of the absentees, of the 6 absentees, 5 were co-sponsors. Nothing gets that level of support. When we ended, I think we had something on the order of 72 co-sponsors. And so it really just all of the spectrum is represented. Richard Blumenthal, Senator Merkley, Senator Warren on one end, and then Senator Blackburn and Hawley and Vance on the other side. And I think that speaks to the fact that on this issue, tech has been a very bipartisan issue, but especially protecting young people on tech platforms has been not just bipartisan, like nonpartisan. This has been a space in which we've been able to have so many close and trusted relationships and been able to I think, push very effectively in Congress. And the same thing I think is happening in the House now. You have, Speaker Emeritus Pelosi as a co-sponsor of the bill. On the other hand, you have a fair amount of very, very conservative people on the House side, including Representative Bill Raucus. And so this is just a space in which, if you look at the polling, there was polling that was released yesterday, and it was something like, 91% of Americans agree that this is a major issue that needs to be addressed by Congress. And a similar number, I think it's like 87%, say that they would be more likely to vote for a member that voted for or supported the Kids Online Safety Act. This is just not to belabor your point and agree with you so thoroughly, but part of the reason why we really got attached and invested so much time in this legislation was when we were doing our first hearings, when we were doing our whistleblower hearings, when we had some of the tech companies come up, people in Connecticut were texting my boss while he was in the hearing, telling them for the first time the stories of what happened to their young people. And I know that there is a lot of members for whom the reason they co-sponsored the bill is something happened to somebody close to them. This is such a personal issue. And you see so many people that are coming at this because they have felt this as an issue. And I think that's why we've gone so far, is because unfortunately, and deeply, deeply unfortunately, I wish that this was not the case. There are so many people impacted by just horrific tragedies that are directly connected to bad experiences online. And that's also part of the reason why this remains extremely bipartisan.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's passed in the Senate. The playground that they got to play in now is in the House.
Okay.
And so as you look at this issue in the House, and obviously there's some differences between the Senate version and the House version, and that's part of the process that we've kind of got to go through. But this is the time when people all over the country, doesn't matter where you live, doesn't matter what party you belong to, this is the time for people to weigh in with their voice and to let their House members know that, get this bill wherever it's going to go, but get it out of committee so we get it to conference. So what are some of the messages you would share to people? And I'm going to put up where people can go to find their House member. They can go online and put in their zip code and they can figure out who their House member is and reach out to them. But how important is it for people to reach out and share their opinion with their elected officials on this issue?
Extremely important. And not just because, we have very limited time left and we're getting into a place in which, there's going to be prioritization. And so we're really struggling. I wouldn't say struggling, but up against a need to make sure that we continue to be a focus. Not just that, but part of the big tobacco playbook, part of the lobbying playbook is you have seen that the tech companies have really drummed up a lot of astroturfing, false opposition, or I think scared some people with disinformation, misinformation, lies about what the bill does. And so you see tech in a very concerted effort attempting to create controversy where controversy doesn't exist and create reasons to just burn time and run out of time. And so what we especially need is people who are interested in this issue, passionate about this issue, working on this issue, to reach out to their representatives and say, this is important. This is a real issue. This is what I have seen. You need to address it. You need to, standing up to powerful companies is not easy. And these are the most powerful companies that have probably existed in history.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a reason why, COSA, if it passes, when it passes, would be the first regulation of tech companies in something on the order of 25 years. And that's because they are so powerful. But, that fact should not, in any way kind of create concern or no one should be dissuaded by that, because we're nearly done. We're 75-80% of the way through. We just need a little bit more of a push and we can get there. But it needs the representatives, Congress people need to hear that this is important, and they need to hear that it's important now. This is such a timely occasion to do this, because there's going to be a markup in the committee that is responsible for the bill on the 18th, on Wednesday. And what we need is to make sure that it is on that markup, it's on the agenda, and that our elected officials are ready to go to bat to make sure that it continues to be as strong of a bill as possible. There's some differences between the bill, and I like the version that we passed out of the Senate better, but we can figure that out. The details on that, they're getting into a good place, and Bill Rockus and Castor have been great champions for the bill. The details we'll hash out. That's not really, shouldn't concern anyone, or it doesn't need to be a focus. What we just need is for especially members on the committee, but anyone, to co-sponsor the bill, to tell leadership that they should move the bill, and to really, I think, talk about this as an issue publicly and with their colleagues. And so that's sort of, phone calls, messages, meeting the members in their districts, requesting meetings from staff, saying why this is important and why they need to support the bill is so critical right now, because this is the window in which we have the ability to act. And I think we should be hopeful that we can move this, but it's essential that anyone who has the interest in time reach out and have those conversations with their elected officials.
Absolutely. Social media, again, incredibly powerful tool for good, and it has been proven to be a good place for good. It's a place where folks that don't have a community can find a community. But we have to understand that this product, like any product, has problems. And in a country which values youth, which values public safety, which values public health, we have an obligation to look at products which cause harm to kids, which cause harm to their mental health, which causes suicidal ideation and suicide, and say, something, we're not talking about adults here who have the ability to ultimately make their own choices. We have an obligation as adults to protect our kids, to provide them access to resources and platforms that are beneficial to them, but at the same time, hold those product creators accountable for the harms that they create for our kids. And that's what COAST is about. And if you believe that we need to continue to protect America's kids by doing reasonable regulatory efforts, then reach out to your House member, tell them that you're interested in this, you want them to support getting that bill passed into law, and make sure that you get out there now and make your voice heard. Collin, appreciate your time today, appreciate your leadership and your hard work on this. I know that you're actively involved in helping your House colleagues see the wisdom of whatever bill needs to get passed so we can get this to conference and ultimately get it over to the president's desk and signed into law.
Thank you for everything that you've done in Congress in Minnesota. And, don't be a stranger to anyone on this. I'm a pretty easy person to reach, and we really, we try to engage in making sure that we're fighting the good fight. So I'm so grateful to work hand in hand with you all. And I think we have the opportunity to do something great this year together.
I agree. Collin, thanks so much, and thanks for your time. Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.